Thank you for having me. Again, my name is Paul McDonald. I'm a product manager here at Google. I've been at Google 9 years and worked on a lot of different things. When I started, there was only search and ads, and I was in the ads group building tools for our support folks. When we started Google Checkout, which is now Google Wallet, I was part of the product team that launched that. I've worked on our developer projects, specifically launching Google App Engine. Also back in ads on optimization, and most recently I was the product lead for Gmail, where I ran strategy and design and direction at Gmail. What I'm doing now is called Google Consumer Surveys. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the product, just to briefly discuss sort of how we came up with the idea and what problems we're trying to solve. And then I'm going to give a demo of the two sides of our market that we've created. And then finally, use some of the questions that you guys had to create and run a survey, which I'll share with you after this meeting, along with this presentation and some tips on creating good surveys, some best practices. Okay, let's get back into the slides here. So I was working on Gmail, again, the product lead for Gmail in 2010, and I saw this chart when I was just reading about the newspaper industry online. This is a chart of online revenue from print and online advertising for the newspaper industry. You can see around 2006, there was a steady decline in revenue, and that mostly had to do with the loss of print revenue from the newspaper industry. And that was because people weren't subscribing to physical papers anymore, and therefore advertisers weren't willing to put up the money for advertisements in those papers. The light blue section of this chart is the online revenue, and you can see that that's not really making up for the loss of print revenue. And so these papers who were moving their content online were turning to paywalls, or they were shutting down. And if this content is blocked or it's not available for users, this is a bad thing for Google because we want the world's information to be open and accessible and free to everyone. So this idea sort of popped in my head. Maybe instead of paying for the content at a paywall with your money, you could pay with your time by answering a 1 or 2 question market research survey. And so what we would do is when you come across this content online, like an article on the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times that would normally have a paywall on it, we now give users a choice. So you can either answer a question, the thing that you see sort of on the left hand of this mock-up, or you could do what the publisher wants you to do, which could be paying for the content or signing up or sharing the content. And for every response that we got from this survey wall, as we called it, we would pay the publisher 5 cents. And so at 1,000 impressions, that's a $50 RPM if we had 100% response rate. It turns out that we have about a 20 to 25% response rate. So we're talking about a $15 RPM for these papers for every 1,000 impressions that they see of this paywall, the survey wall. And that turns out to be an order of magnitude more than most of the papers could get through ads alone or a paywall. So you see, we've sort of created this ecosystem, a 3-part ecosystem with 3 players. We have the users coming in to read the content on the papers and who want access to this premium content. We have publishers who are spending lots of money on journalists and other expenditures to get this content out to you for free. And then the market research folks, companies like you, or small and medium-sized businesses, Fortune 100 companies that are using our platform to conduct market research and learn more about their customers. All right, so at this point, I'm going to show you a quick demo of what this looks like on one of our publisher sites. This is Boston.com. It's part of the Boston Globe. And they have a section of their site called The Big Picture, and it's a set of images taken by their photojournalist about a specific subject. Normally this would cost money. You'd have to subscribe to the Globe to actually read this. But now we've implemented our survey wall so that you could answer questions instead. So the way that this works on images or image galleries is that we show you a few images, and then we show you the survey question. And then the rest of the images are obfuscated or elided. You can't actually look at them very well. They're covered. And I'll show you that down here. So here's a few images for, what is this? Looks like some race car driving. And then we come to our survey. And then the rest of the images are kind of grayed out. So you can't really see them very well. You can't see any of the text. It's all blocked out. So here we have a choice. We can either answer the question or we could share this content on a social network. We've seen a couple pictures, so we know sort of the content. We feel pretty good that if we like it, we could share it. But in this case, let's answer the question. So, have you researched or purchased renter's insurance policy in the last 12 months? Well, actually, I do rent a place, and I have looked at this, so I'm going to say yes. And this is a two-part question. So the second part is, how did you purchase your renter's insurance policy? And I did it online. And once I answer that, now I have full access to the rest of the pictures, or in some cases, the article on the site. So that's kind of the basic premise. People are answering questions to get access to content. Market researchers are putting up these questions. And we're collecting more information about the user than just the questions that they answered. We know through their browsing behavior, sort of the sites that they've been at, the things that they've purchased. And we can predict their age and gender and a few other demographic variables that go along with the answers themselves. So let me go back to the slides real quick. The key part for us is that the user experience is really great, because if users aren't willing to answer these questions, we don't really have a product. And so we measure that all the time. Would they rather answer a question or pay for the content? And you can see overwhelmingly people would rather answer a question than do almost anything else. So we feel like we have a pretty good user experience here. As I mentioned, we have these Google-powered demographic pieces of data along with each of the responses. So we have what we call big data, or what the market research industry calls big data, billions of data points about browsing behavior from our DoubleClick ad network. And we use that to, again, come up with a model and predict the age and gender for the respondent, which is a proxy for their behavior. And then we use built-in segmentation tools in the reports to actually allow market researchers to see that. And I'll show you that in just a second. Then also, on the market research side, we can do real-time targeting of users. So if you want to reach specific people who in a specific age or gender bracket or geography, you can do that. Or if you want a general population sample, we can do that as well. Finally, if you have a custom audience, you want to screen out people who don't meet your sort of customer profile, we can do that as well through what we call a screening question. And what this means is this is sort of the two-part question that I just answered. You have one question which screens out people that you don't care about. And then the second question is one of a series of questions from your survey. And again, I'll show you how that all works in just a minute. Finally, we spend a lot of time on the validity of our research. Again, if we can't trust in the answers, then we don't really have a product to sell to people who want market research. So what we do is we actually take sort of known incidence rates of various health and media consumption behaviors. Things like, are you a smoker? Do you have asthma? Do you have a disability? Do you own a DVR? These are known incidence rates that you can get from government data. And we measure that across our publisher network. And so we can tell how closely we align to the actual data. And this is the average absolute error, or the distance from the known quantities. And the bars here in gray are sort of traditional methodologies, internet probability-based panels like knowledge networks, or internet non-probability samples like something like an Ipsos omnibus. And we compare that to all of the samples that we've taken from our platform, and we have lower error on average than any other methodology out there. So we feel pretty good about the data. Okay, at this point, I'm going to just quickly show you some example surveys, just so you can get a sense of the platform. And then we're going to take some questions from one of you guys, Love Pivot, and create a survey so that you can kind of see how the creation part works and how quickly we can get answers back. So this is a survey from a dog toy company called Pride Bites. They make these toys, dog toys that are basically indestructible. So they wanted to understand their target market a little better and understand what people were doing with toys when they were playing with their dogs, so they could build toys that were interesting. So the first thing that they did was they screened out people who don't have a dog. This is the screening question they asked, a simple question: do you have a dog? It's the national population, according to the ASPCA, is about 36%, and we've come back with 37.7, so we're pretty close there. The people who answered yes to the screening question saw one of these 8 questions in their survey. The distribution of the users across all 8 questions is the same, so we have the same distribution of age and gender and location, but it's not the same person answering all of the questions. So we'll just quickly look through some of this data. This is the top line results, and then you can look into any one of these questions and look at the actual results through our interface. And I'll just quickly take you through the interface so you can see some of the features, and then again we'll start a survey so you can see the creation process. So again, this is the top line, the top level answers. We can drill down into this data, and I'll show you how to do that in a second. But you can see we call out the winner. We tell you both in chart form and in number form the percentage of people who picked each answer, along with the margin of error. The margin of error is done based on the Wilson confidence interval, so it's asymmetric. Usually when you see margin of error, it's like plus or minus 3%. Here we have plus or minus sort of different numbers, and again, that's due to the Wilson confidence interval. From this top line, we can do things like see what males who are 18 to 24 years old in urban areas and low incomes think. And again, the data gets sparse at a very low number of responses. Here we're talking about 4 people. But you can filter down through this data, and then you could purchase more responses if you care about a specific demographic. We can also do things like compare males and females across all of the answers. Or we can drill down into a specific region or state in the United States. So if I just wanted to see the answers from California, I could do that. And then maybe the cities in California, I could compare on the state of California, and you can see responses from each of the cities. So there's a lot of depth in this data. And again, we infer a lot of the demographic data from the way that people are browsing the internet before they respond to our questions. A couple other things that you can do here is we can look at specific subpopulations. So if you wanted to see younger males versus older females, you could do that. And basically any combination of this demographic data, or as many of these subpopulations as you want, you can add to kind of get the breakdown that you want. Finally, one of the interesting things that we do is what we call insights. These are statistically significant subpopulations, differences in the subpopulations of the data. So here we can see that suburban areas said that they owned a dog more than urban areas, which makes sense. Or that age affected how many people said yes. And you can click into these graphs, and it will pull up the actual view in the tool itself so that you can further drill down into it. You can export this data, so if you just wanted the CSV to look at it in Excel, you could do so. Or if you want the image to put in a presentation, you can do that as well. We have a bunch of different question types, so let me just clear the filters here. We have things like open-ended numeric questions where people can write in a number. These are good for price sensitivity or understanding what people are willing to pay. So it looks like on average people are willing to pay about $8.10 for a dog toy. We have question types that are image-based, so you can pick between two images or a set of images which one you like best. And we do things to basically have a tournament-style winner. So we compare each one of these images to every other one through a series of users and pick the ones that come out on top. You can do multi-select, so you can answer more than one answer at once. Let me see if there's some other stuff. Ratings. So these are your general Likert scales, 5 or 7 point scales, where you can pick the polls and then people pick between each of those ratings. And let me see if there's anything else interesting. One other thing is that you can drag and drop these answers together. So if you just wanted to see like the top and bottom answers and compare them, you could do that as well. So that's kind of an overview of the tool. We also have some data about the responses and the sample that we created. But we don't have much time, so I want to go through and actually create a survey based on some questions that were sent to us, and show you how you can create a survey and the types of things you may want to do for different problems that you have with your business. All right, let me try to pull up these questions. Oh, where are you guys from, or what companies are
23andMe.
23andMe, great.
LawPivot.
LawPivot, great. So I think the LawPivot, you guys sent a bunch of questions that you were considering running on our platform. Do you know?
Probably some other members of our team probably sent it.
Okay. Do you mind coming up and we can kind of talk about LawPivot and actually run a survey based on some of those questions?
I didn't write those questions in particular.
Okay.
I know the person who actually did that probably.
Okay. Do you just want to talk about LawPivot, your company, just so we have some background before we start the survey?
Well, what LawPivot is the concept.
Do you mind using the microphone just so that everyone else can hear?
Yeah, and make sure you turn it on.
Okay.
There's just a switch at the top.
Well, what LawPivot is, it's a confidential legal question answer website where individuals and businesses can get answers to their legal questions from lawyers on our site, and lawyers provide answers in order to demonstrate their expertise and market their practice.
Okay. And what sort of business challenges do you guys have, or do you have ideas of the types of things that you'd like to understand about your customers that we could run a quick survey on? Some of those are up here.
Yeah, I mean, definitely one thing we always want to do is be able to get information about how our users are finding the experience as well as our lawyers. Because we have a community of both. I mean, two sides. You have the consumer and the businesses and the lawyers. It's always a challenge for us to figure out what exactly how they're doing in terms of how to find experience, the quality of the answers that the lawyers are providing, the quality of the questions. So we're working where we constantly poll our users to see how they're doing.
I see. And so this is all based on users of your site. How do you know how to get people to come to your site? Or like what market research do you do to understand potential customers of your site?
Well, I mean, there's two different types of users on our site. We have the consumers and businesses, and then the lawyers.
Yeah.
Lawyers, we have lawyers on our team. I myself am a lawyer, so we understand the lawyer market, so we know how to market to lawyers. For users, in terms of consumers and businesses, we rely on a variety of different marketing techniques to get users to come to our site. Organic, paid search, online advertising, those type of methods.
Okay. Well, let's look through some of the questions that some folks on your team sent, and then maybe we could pick a topic that we survey folks, and then actually create a survey and run it, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So it looks like around here we have understanding of why people trust lawyers, or how they do what they consider good attorneys. So we could sort of understand the general population's perception of the legal community, which might be something that would be interesting to you. We could do a little bit about pricing, about how much people generally pay for legal advice and whether or not your pricing is in the expected area. How quickly they expect to get answers back. Is there a particular area you want to focus on?
Maybe focus on the lawyer experience.
The lawyer experience. So these types of questions here.
Not necessarily trusting of lawyers, but we want to know how probably our lawyers are thinking about the website. We always want to be able to see, we want to gauge whether to engage, what we can do to create a better experience for them.
Yeah.
Those are the type of questions that we're always interested in asking and getting information on.
Okay, so just quickly, the way that our platform works is we can survey sort of the general population across the internet. So it's not necessarily on your site. In fact, it probably won't be on your site. But so we can ask people if they've had experience with other legal sites, or if they've ever had a legal issue that they had to contact a lawyer about. But we probably can't ask them about your particular site because it will be harder to find those folks. So why don't we do something around whether or not someone has had some experience with either a legal website online and what they liked about that, or if they've had an experience with lawyers and what they dislike or like about that, so that we can improve the legal pivot experience. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Okay, cool. So when you go in and create a survey, the first thing that we do here is we add some minor details about the survey. And we can use either a brand new survey, or we can use a template that we've created for various business type decisions and mechanisms. Let's use a template, and then we'll prune some of the questions from the template, because I think that will make sense in this case. So let's talk about, let's see, what's a good template here? Maybe our purchase behavior. Let's see. Okay, we'll start here and then we'll remove some of this. So this is for Law Pivot. How do you spell Law Pivot?
L-A-W-P-I-V-O-T. Capital P. Oh,
capital P, okay. So this is going to be around, let's say, purchase behavior for legal advice. Is that an accurate, representation of what Law Pivot does? Like, is it legal advice or?
Legal advice and legal information.
Legal advice and information, okay. All right. We can add tags so that we can find these surveys quicker at some later point in time, but, sorry. All right, Okay, and the second step is where we actually do the targeting. So we can target users in certain countries in the world, Canada, US, and the UK for now. Eventually we'll be out at multiple countries around the world. Right now we're starting with the English-speaking countries first. But here we can either select an audience that represents the general internet population, or we can do an audience based on age, gender, geography, if you know who your customers are. Or we can do something that we call a screening question. So we can screen out people that we don't care about. Now in this case, we may want to screen out people who have never had any interaction with a lawyer or had needed legal advice, because we don't really care about those people. The best thing to do here is not to ask a yes and no question for screeners. There's something called acquiescence bias, which tends to mean that people generally want to say yes to whatever question you're asking. So the better thing to do here is do something like, which of these best describes So you can see a preview of the question as we type it in on the right here. And then we'll say something like, I recently sought legal advice. Sorry.
Maybe you want to put, I'm afraid of lawyers.
Okay. My typing skills are pretty poor. Okay, so we have 4 answers here. Then we can pick the ones that we want to get people to answer another question from our survey. So let's say we care about people who have either recently sought legal advice or are in the process of seeking legal advice, so that we can sort of get to our customers a little better than just a general pop survey would. Now, in the third part is where you actually create the questions. Now, since we used a template, we have 7 questions created for us. We can either choose to use these questions as it is and kind of fill in the blanks, the places where there's a word in all caps, or we could just define our own questions. So let's look through some of these and see if they're interesting. So we could say something like, where did you buy, or where did you purchase, or what was your last interaction? Let's try that. So, what was your last interaction with a lawyer? Again, my spelling and typing are terrible. So, what are the types of things that, like the types of legal advice or the sections that you're trying to get your customers to come to Law Pivot for?
It's primarily just to get legal advice information, and hopefully that turns into, whatever legal issue or problem they have turns into actual business for a lawyer.
Okay. Are there specific types of lawyers or legal advice that you specialize in, or?
It's pretty much general. It's probably the main areas. Go handle both the consumer side and business.
Sorry.
Sorry. We have consumers and businesses, so they have different legal needs. On the business side, they probably have contract issues. They have a lawsuit. Or at the business side, there's all different types of things. You have family law issues, wills and trusts, immigration.
Okay. Immigration. This is like family is the wills and trusts.
Yeah, they're 2 different areas, but a lot of times they cross over.
Okay. Okay, let's do that. Immigration.
Real estate is another big one.
Okay, and then we'll just put an other down here. And the other, what we can do here is pin it to the bottom so that the rest will randomize in the answer that we see them. So this will you can click this button to refresh. This is a preview how people would see your question online. You can see that the 4 options on top rotate while the other stays at the bottom. Just makes it a lot easier for the folks to read, and kind of a nice thing you can do. So this will help us understand what are the biggest areas or potential areas to focus on our website. Let's look at another question here. How about let's ask where people usually turn to ask for legal advice so that we can understand the marketing channels we may want to go after. So where do you turn? So in this case, I assume that we probably have recommendations from friends and family, or the internet, like my company's legal counsel. Oops, sorry.
CNN.
Sorry. What other places do people usually get advice or figure out where to get advice from lawyers?
The internet tends to be I would probably put internet probably the top one.
Okay.
Recommendations probably second. Company's legal counsel is probably that's if you have access to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that seems like it covers it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll do that. The other thing that we could do.
Oh, you might want to add is like I have my own lawyer already.
Okay. That's good.
Or possibly break out the internet. So do I start with Google, or do I go to maybe a government site?
Okay. Let's do that in another question because we'll figure out how people get to LawPivot in terms of the funnel. So let's again pin other at the bottom, and then we'll randomize the order here. Another thing that we can do is add a question type, which is an open-ended type text. So we can have people type in where they found their last lawyer, and this will give us a chance to sort of broaden the number of possible responses and understand if there are other places that we could target for our marketing to find people where maybe we just haven't thought of before. So we could say, where do you... And again, this format is open-ended, so they can type in whatever they want, and we'll get some nice aggregated results back. Okay, so back to our questions. So you had a question about the internet, or sort of breaking that down. Can you explain what you were saying again? Maybe talking to the mic.
Yeah, I was just saying that we could break out. The internet's pretty broad.
Okay.
So do you search for your actual question? Or do you search for legal advice, or do you maybe start with like a government site like the DMV with your specific legal issue?
So you want to know like
search for your specific question?
Okay, search for a question like on a search engine?
Mm-hmm.
Or find it on a government site? How about like go to specific legal sites like LawPivot or LegalZoom or other folks? So, are there other places you think people look for advice or you'd like to understand?
Yeah, so the first one is searching for their specific question, but they could also maybe just type legal advice into Google.
Okay.
Maybe a lawyer's website or something like that.
So one thing that you see we run into here is that we have some recommended limits on the number of characters you can have in both the question and the answer text. When you reach that maximum, we do this because we want people to both think of questions that are concise and accurate, but also allow people the respondents to read the questions and answer them very quickly. So we have to kind of reword this here. Let's just do search for generic legal advice. Okay. Let's just drop some of these questions in between here. So do you guys offer discounts on legal advice or promotions or coupons?
Not on our site, but we did try some daily deal sites.
Daily deals? Okay. So maybe that's another place that we should put up here, like, or we could understand if daily deals have some, how likely are you to, legal site, okay, so we can ask this, which may answer our question or may not. And then we'll do this question as well. So do you usually buy, or do you usually, use a discount or promo? Legal advice. And we'll drop this one. Okay, so we have 6 questions here. Mostly, this is kind of focused on how we get people at the top of the funnel to come into Legal Pivot. You know, where they've had their last interaction, how they actually seek out legal advice. Do they use promotions? Are discounts important to them? And so what we can kind of understand is how we can target our marketing towards folks who are seeking legal advice through this survey. So at the next part is where you actually pay for the questions. So don't mind the purple lines. These are some internal things that we're working on that are only available for admins of our app. But you can see kind of the pricing here. Now, for a question with a screener, it's 50 cents per response, and we can get up to 5,000 responses per question for this particular type of question. But let's say we're going to get 200 responses for this question. We're going to run it just this once. So it's going to cost $600. Now, for a startup, that's pretty expensive. But if you go out and find marketing resources or market research resources at any other place, this is about 1/10 of the cost of the market research that you would run somewhere else. So in that respect, it's actually pretty affordable. In this particular case, I'm going to start this for free so that you guys can get this data, and then if you're okay with it, we can share it with the rest of the group as well, just so that they can see the results as they come up. So we'll do that, and I will send out those results along with the presentation and a primer on how to create good market research, some best practices, and some coupons for everyone to actually use. Rick, I'm not sure how much more time that we have. Do you want me to give some more demos, or are we good?
I think if you've got questions under here, or there was one that came in the doc.
Okay, yeah, sure.
So tackle that, and then if there's more to cover, we can cover. Otherwise, we can wrap.
Okay, sounds good. All right, so we have one question in the doc. So it says, hi there, I'm not sure if it's too late. I'd like to ask the following question to 3 separate cohorts: small business owners, students, and young professionals. If we can only speak to one cohort, I'd prefer to target small business owners. Okay, so this is this is a question that you actually want to run on our platform, we could do that. Let me actually start this through our backend, and then we'll get to your question. So I just started the survey that we just ran. Typically, you'll see results within 24 to 48 hours for the questions that you asked. We could probably see a few if we just go to that survey now. So this is, again, the survey that we've created. I'll share it with you so you can get access to it. But as responses come in, they'll show up here. We're going to go back and actually create a new survey so that we can answer this question and see what people have to say in the US. So this is a question about voting behavior. We're going to start a new survey and just do this quickly. You want to ask 3 separate cohorts: small business owners, students, and young professionals. Let's do small business owners. So here we can say, do you own a small business? Oh, sorry, it's better to ask like this. Do you own a business less than 50 employees? Yes, no, and I'll flag the yes answer. And then the question here is, has who you want to vote for changed in the last few weeks? So this is a multiple choice question. And we'll type it as is here and then talk about the wording. Has who you want to vote for in the last few weeks? Yes, no, still undecided. So we're going to ask this again to the general population. We'll randomize the order of these answers so that there's no position bias. That means that people aren't clicking on the first thing because it's the first thing. You can do lots of different ways to randomize this, either through the answer order or display it in that order and pin one of these. So we'll do it like this. Has who you want to vote for changed in the last few weeks? Vote for... Sorry, I'm just trying to think of a clearer way to word this. Any suggestions are welcome. Is who you want to vote for... Let's just be specific here. Presidential election changed in the last few weeks. Okay. So again, we'll continue this. We can do, again, a 200 response survey. This would be $100 if you want to ask 200 random people on the internet. And again, I'll start this so that we can see the answers ourselves. Cool. So we'll get that started, and again, I'll share that as well so you can see that data. And let's go back and see if we've gotten any responses to our original survey. Doesn't look, oops. Doesn't look like we have yet. We may have some. Each of these surveys is reviewed for some policies, so it may be still being reviewed before we actually put it live and online. Okay, are there any questions in the audience that we can that I can answer?
I just have a question about this. I just have a question about this product. What's the usual turnaround time for getting results?
So on average, it's about 24 hours to get the results. So generally, when you do market research, it takes about a week to 2 weeks, and this is about a day. So that's sort of the advantage here.
Can you use this product on users of your existing product, or is it only for kind of mass, like public?
Yeah, so right now what we're doing is basically the general population or screen to a specific audience based on the screener question. I think eventually we want to offer something for websites themselves to run these questions on their own site. But I think you guys sort of came in midway through the presentation about how we actually show these. So what we do is we actually show these questions as a replacement for paywalls for content online. So instead of having to pay with your money, you can pay with your time by answering a 1 or 2 question market research survey. So this is one of our sites. It's boston.com, based on, which is part of the Boston Globe. You can see some of these pictures. Actually, since I'll have to do this in an incognito window. So the way that this works is, as people are just browsing around the internet, we have hundreds of these sites that have our survey questions on them. And sorry. So as you look at the content, part of it is obfuscated, or what we call elided. And in order to remove that, you have to either answer a question or do what the publisher wants you to do, which in this case is to show their content. So I'll answer the question: do you currently own any of the following types of companies? I do own a company with less than 5 employees. We make margarita popsicles. They're called sloshies if you want to try them out. Would you ever consider using market research for your company? Yeah, of course. I work in market research, so I answer that, and then now I have access to the rest of the content on the page. So that's kind of how that works. This is on a picture gallery, but we do this for articles like on the Wall Street Journal or New York Times, New York Daily News, and a bunch of other places.
Is it targeted?
Is it targeted?
So will it be with some articles related to the company? So
Yeah.
we work for genetics, so would it be genetics articles?
No. So we purposely don't target the questions towards the content of the data because it actually biases
Yeah,
the
that
questions
makes
that
sense.
come out. So what we're trying to do is put it on random content across the internet. It looks like there's another question here. Do you save the responses from users and use it in other products? Especially, do you know that they're logged in as Google users? So we don't actually store this alongside a Google profile. We don't know that they're logged in as Google users. We do know their DoubleClick cookie, which is our ad preferences cookie. And you can see what Google knows about you or thinks about you if you search ads preferences manager on google.com. That will tell you what Google thinks your age and gender is, along with your interests. And we store this data separately from that data even, and we don't use it in any other products today. Cool. Any other questions I can answer while we're here? No? Okay. Well, thank you very much. I'll be around here. We're going to send out, again, this presentation and some survey tips along with some promotion codes so that you guys can use this for free.